episode of Today in World War II, April 11th, a British sub almost packs a heck of a scalp. A Frenchman escapes from Colditz Castle for the first time ever. Bad day for British destroyers in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. The Soviets are grappling to take Vienna, and the American troops can capture an intact V1 weapon plant in Germany. Let's get started. Okay, so on April 11th, 1940, the British submarine Spearfish damaged the pocket battleship Lutzow, knocking it out of the action for 1 year. That torpedo, one of the six that they fired, nearly ripped off the stern of the pocket battleship. And so in 1940, this meant a lot because pocket battleships right now were wreaking havoc on merchant vessels in the Atlantic. So for them, for one submarine with one torpedo that actually hit, six expended, to I wonder how many merchant ships that one action saved from the Lutzow. I know I'm not pronouncing it right. I know it's Lutzow. I know that they saved a lot of merchant lives, merchant marine lives and ships from going down. Because you know what? Put out action. That's the same as sinking it almost. Not quite, but almost. Okay. On April 11, 1941, a French lieutenant, a POW in the Colditz Castle, which was the most secure, so the Germans thought, POW camp during World War II. Just give a little history. The it became the main POW camp for a lot of Polish officers after 39. Then they started bringing the um, Frenchman. The Brits started to trickle in. They weren't put in Colditz to begin with. They had to go through the initiation. The initiation was to successfully escape from a German POW camp. It doesn't mean that they made a home run. Obviously, if they were into Switzerland, then they wouldn't matter. But successful escape meaning they actually got beyond the walls or the wire of the camp, and they were able to try and escape. Eventually, they got caught. So the Brits were there, but they were going to trickle in. Eventually, it was going to turn into mostly Allied, British and Commonwealth troops. Few Americans, but they moved the French and the Poles out before that. Having said that, the fact that this French Lieutenant Alain Leray was the first one to actually get outside the castle walls, that was a huge success, whether he made it or not. That was a huge success. On April 11th, 1942 and 1943, that was a kind of not a bad day for British destroyers. On 42, the British destroyer HMS Kingston was bombed and sunk by the Luftwaffe at Malta. Malta's really a dangerous place to be right now, whether you're a pilot, whether you're a submarine or a Royal Navy detachment, in this case, the destroyer HMS Kingston. It's a dangerous place because the elite Flieger Corps that Hitler had brought from the Eastern Front to Sicily was their whole job was to destroy subs, Royal Navy, and of course the Spitfires and bombers on Malta, and they were being bombed multiple times a day by elite Luftwaffe squadrons. So, yeah, not surprising that the Kingston was bombed and sunk at Malta. Now, on the same day in 1943, a German submarine U-188 torpedoed and sank the British destroyer Beverly in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the situation in the Atlantic at this time is actually improving for the Allies. Uh, Next month in May, the Germans are going to start referring to that as Black May because everything the Allies had been building up to was now going to work. The escort carriers, closing the air gap in the central Atlantic, having hedgehogs, having better sonar, having introducing hunter-killer groups, and they they're going to sink so many U-boats that Dönitz is forced to take them out of action to bring them back to their ports for a while because it was just suicide to keep sending them out there. So this was what was going on in the Atlantic in 43. In 1945, on this date, April 11th, the Soviets are getting closer to taking Vienna. You had the Soviet Fourth Guards Army. It's attacking the canals over the Danube in Vienna. And then you also had the Soviet 20th Guards Rifle Corps and 1st Mechanized Corps are attacking the Reichsbrücke Bridge. But on this date anyway, they weren't able to take it. Now, I talked about this, about Vienna a few days ago in one of my previous episodes. And the Austrian resistance had met with the Soviets and was trying to broker a deal somehow to where uh, Austria, or excuse me, Vienna would not be utterly destroyed by the Soviets in their attack. And they were able to take Vienna without going through, you know, mass destruction. So that was great. Vienna was a is a jewel of the Habsburg Empire and lots of architecture and history there. So I'm glad that it was saved from that. Just a little trivia here. Uh, Vienna is the one capital of Central Eastern Europe that the Soviets occupied and they actually gave it up. So Austria was determined to be a neutral country. So every other place they went, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Romania, Bulgaria, those places they remained under communist occupation domination, until the 1990s, late 80s, early 90s. Well, in this case, Vienna was given back, which was the one exception, if you want to have some history, some trivia there. And finally, on April 11, 1945, American troops captured an intact V weapons plant in Nordhausen. It was V1s and V2s. And of course, this was the start of the Great Race between the Western Allies, the Brits, the Americans, and the Soviets to get as many German scientists as possible in their camp. Now, obviously, most of the scientists would prefer to go to the West because they would live in freedom for the most part. They would get paid very well, whereas the German scientists, it's not going to be so rosy over there. Now, they're not going to, put them in labor camps and make them work in the Colima gold fields in the Arctic. But it's definitely the quality of life would definitely be better over in the West than in the East. So not saying the Soviets didn't get their share. I mean, a lot of the Soviets or the Germans were in Soviet occupied territory, so they had a home field advantage. But yeah, the Americans were doing their best to do that because after all, we had a space program to build later in the 60s, and most of the leading scientists were German. They were German. If you watch Apollo 13 with uh, Tom Hanks when they were getting ready for their launch, you know, he was talking with a German scientist, right? Who obviously, now that we know in history, he had been working probably on a V1 or V2s. So space program did have some dirty Nazi hands there as well. Well, that's it. I don't have any dirty hands in front of you, so I'm going to say goodbye to you, and I will see you tomorrow.